Let me give you a new scientific rule, the likes of which you would never hear in the scientific community, of course. For those of you on audio, things only partially seen are always seen as something else. And by something else, I'm telling you they are not seen for being what they are. Never, ever. And make this a subnotation. This does not include, or this does not infer that they are simply seen partially as what they are. They are seen as something else. If we were talking about X, whatever it was, and X is only partially seen, then X is seen as Z, green, 14, but it in no wise is seen as like X over 2 or X over 12 or X over 1,002. It is seen as something else, always. Let me give you a great example. Well, let me give you an example. The idea, in English it arose, I guess, from medicine, but there are aspects of it in other places. But the idea that there are side effects, that is, that there are effects other than the intended effect of whatever the medicine was. Let's stick with medicine for a second. That there are such things as side effects. It's just accepted. You people that have no background in medicine, all of us that are not doctors, people use this. And you even stretch it into areas and use the term almost as a metonymy. I'm not going to say metaphor, see? As though it unconditionally has an understood meaning, and it's very precise that it is that there are effects that are not the intended effects. I've got to suggest to you very strongly that this ranges somewhere from specious to spurious and then back again. No, it doesn't. It's perfectly all right, except it falls within this law. And let me see if I can make you see why. It is a case of ordinary intelligence seeing only partially. Now, it would appear to be that the intellect, from one way I can put it to you, that appears to be that the intellect is seeing what it needs to see under ordinary conditions. That someone is working in a laboratory and they're attempting to find a treatment for high blood pressure, and that's what they're looking for. And then they find one that the side effects is, on certain people, it seems to produce increased hair growth, which to many people in this instance, I was thinking of something that's actually going on now, there's some people that would not find it to be a negative side effect. But then there are others, such as, let us say, the general classification, the species of women, perhaps, finds it to be a negative side effect. But it is basically, in that ordinary binary eyesight, is dividing up all totalities into, in this case again, into twos, and in this case it's into effects and into side effects. It would appear to be, I repeat, that ordinary city needs might apparently defend itself by saying, well, the only thing that the people involved, the only thing that we see, the only thing that we find to be an effect in a positive sense is that which we were searching for. And that anything that is extraneous to this, if not in opposition to it, is going to be a side effect. But now see if you can jump from the world of medicine and the world of high blood pressure and additional hair growth in wanted or unwanted areas of your body. Can you see that anything that is only partially seen, and now you've got to forget the reasons that seem to be pressing in the city, such as the researcher looking for a treatment of high blood pressure. Other than that, just all of the time this is taking place, that is, things only partially seen are always seen as something else. Nothing can be seen in its totality because nothing is needed to be seen in its totality. There is indeed no such thing, no such division into effects and side effects, that it's all an effect, to use city terminology, to even stick with binary reality. There is absolutely no such thing as an effect and then a side effect. What you're dealing with is what the thing is, and then what you're dealing with is ordinary intelligence. It has to divide it. It has to see contours between that, between what I saw today and what I saw yesterday, or what I saw and what the research team trying to get the grant over at another university, what they saw or what they said they saw. Well, what I have seen, what I believe I have seen, has got to be able to be describable. It has got to be capable of verbalization, and to be so, the unrecognized aspect of it is, to be so means that you are only seeing it partially. You couldn't see it totally, or you couldn't describe it. You couldn't name it. But also, beyond just the fact that you are seeing it partially, is the fact that you will never be able to see it as it is. You will absolutely always see it as something else. An example I made that seemed perhaps fairly inspecific of saying that an X partially seen would be seen as being green, 14, or Y is in no way rhetorical. That you absolutely will not see it as it is, and you will not see it simply in partiality. You will not see part of an X. You will see it as being something else. Nobody likes that? I might add, for anybody who's curious, there is absolutely, positively no proof for this whatsoever. Right? If it was, it would not be one of the extraordinary laws that I try to bring to some sort of exposure here. But there is absolutely no proof of that with ordinary intelligence. You cannot think about it. You can hear what I say. That sentence is within the framework of city rationale. The sentence makes sense. But the mind cannot conceive of such a thing happening. It cannot conceive of any purpose to it when there is every purpose in the world. As long as everything is seen as being something else. You understand what that does? In a sense, they do not have to worry about coming up with new forms of energy. They don't have to worry about making nuclear power absolutely safe. Of course, now I am speaking synodically, not metaphorically. But they don't have to worry about producing other forms of energy because you have got a kind of, if you could see it from a more complex view, you've got a kind of controlled, astounding chaos. It is a kind of churning up of energy that would make a greedy stockbroker appear to be a humanitarian, that it keeps things moving all of the time, because everything that is partially seen is seen as being something else. It is not seen as being what it is, and it's not even being seen as being a part of what it is. It's seen as being something else. Not enough of you seem to enjoy or to see what I was using about the side effects. I thought that was subtle enough that some of you could grab it and then realize that that wasn't all there was to it. Try it again. That's still, unless I change my mind again, the best example. That people passing for experts, people passing for being intelligent in the ordinary sense, doctors, scientists, researchers. They state we have a new treatment. Let's just say a new drug that goes right to the heart of some ailment that many people have. And you hear it, yes, I know about the ailment. I had a relative that had it. Here is a new drug that directly, for the first time, has a salubrious effect in some manner on this particular ailment. That sounds fine. But then they point out, it does, however, have a certain undesirable, they normally say, but if they don't, you're supposed to, if you're sophisticated enough to know, they're saying it has a certain undesirable side effect. But then again, if you don't know this, even people in the city now know this, that is, people in the pharmaceutical business, in medicine, that all drugs, generally speaking, have side effects. For a doctor to tell you, to offer you a drug, or prescribe a drug and say, well, it has certain side effects, or if you're the type to say, well, that sounds fine, but does it have side effects? You're being redundant to start with. Now, he may not even know it. I don't want to go into that. Well, some of you might get frightened if you knew how little doctors knew about medicine, or if you knew how little those who make medicine know about medicine. But remember, life knows about medicine, so put your faith where it belongs. That is, put your faith where it's going, whether you like it or not. But back to appearances at city level, back to the 3D world, it seems that everything they come up with, a drug, let's say with that example, no matter that they can get down to the molecular level, no way they can fool around at that level now, with all the technology and all the expertise they have, and almost create, even for little small maladies, bespoke, custom-made drugs to go right at one thing, right at one little virus, right at one ailment. But by God, no matter how they seem to narrow down the focus, the intent of this new structure, this new drug, it invariably has a what? A side effect. But I am trying to tell you, there is no such thing, and you should be able to see this, there is no such thing as a side effect. This drug, whatever it is they came up with, if they took an extract from some herb they found, whatever it is, let's call it, let's call it drug X, herb X, thing X. All right, it is what it is. Everything. But then to partially see it, to apparently partially want to use it, to apparently be intelligent, that is, narrow down your focus, you find, well, wait, the parts that we apparently want to deal with are like over here. And that part seems to be all right. And it seems to have some effect. Now we're talking about drugs, and we're talking about anything else. Opinions, political, economic theories, your feelings toward people. Now, let's go back to drugs. So they observe, they study, they do controlled testing, they do blind testing, they make sure that their colleagues or somebody else, an impartial outside organization, can repeat it, and they all come to the conclusion that this one part, the red part, has the desired effect. But outside that red circle and the big circle, it has side effects. Do you hear me? If you look, just stand back and look, there is the effect. There is the reality of drug X. There is it. Now, the reason I use the example, I can't even think of the brand name of it now. Part of the pharmaceutical is that they now have, here it is in late '88, they now have the federal government of America's permission now to sell this drug that was originally made to treat high blood pressure, to sell it now by prescription, made available to produce hair growth in men who are getting a little thin on top, not inside, but on top of the skull. But now look at it. People who buy it now, that they're hoping to encourage their hair growth, now the side effects are going to be whatever it does to their blood pressure. Now, do you see? This is not ironic. This is not silly. This is not funny. This is the way life works. But ordinary intelligence cannot see that. Because of why? Because of this kind of sight. Because that's the way ordinary intelligence operates. But there is no such thing as side effects. Now, I was pointing out to you, somewhat en passant perhaps, that people who believe they see irony in life, which throughout history have, that one aspect oftentimes is treated as a characteristic, a sure sign of somebody's intelligence, the great satirist of literature. But those who really believe they see irony, they may smile, they may be known as having a sense of humor, but I can assure you they're up to about the 6th level of being pissed. That's the way they're wired up, because there is no irony. It's just a form of hostility. It's a form of being mad that you're going to die. It's a form of being mad, can I say, it's a form of those people being mad about how dumb they are. Of course, they don't know it for sure, but they suspect it. Their real fear, the satirist of life, since I went this far and if you won't say anything, their real fear is that they believe they see some other people, if not a whole lot of people, but they're just a little bit dumber than they are. They're pretty sure. But that doubt of knowing how close they are to that neighborhood, to them that's ironic. That I could have been so smart. I could have been a challenger. You don't have to be Brando to do that. They have been doing it throughout history. I could have been somebody if I'd been just that much smarter. Or if I can just stay that much smarter than the people I think are that much dumber than me, I think. You cannot see an idea, you cannot see a belief, you cannot see an opinion, and you cannot see that which you believe that you are perhaps beginning to furnish as far as information or new views on your own. You will never see them for what they are. Being in that position, people who believe that they are observers of themselves, that they believe they're observers of life, it creates this well accepted, in some areas well respected areas of satire, this ironic view of life. As long as I'm here, I guess I can give you one other great example that permeates all of history. It's parts of life's body, remember. We're still talking about life's body. Parts of life's body off on one side, off on one stream, just takes glee, if not experience absolute heartbreak and fury over what seems to be the ironic aspects of so-called religion, of little people in history. I say little figuratively, some of them were big and fat and tall, but stamping their little feet on this planet and screaming about the irony, if not the stupidity of religion, preaching love and forgiveness, and they go to war and kill each other. And they stand up as though they are in the midst of all this dust, of all these intellectual pygmies around their feet, and that they're standing up and they can see better. Now I'm telling you that there are no pygmies around somebody's feet like that. And if you're one of them, there are no pygmies around your feet. And if you've got any ability to be intellectual even at the second level, look down. You don't see anybody dumber than you are. That's what frightens you. That's what infuriates you. But you have these areas that you think, wait a minute, if I was in charge of religion, for instance, if I was in charge of all religion, I'd stop this kind of stuff about some of these people that claim they're religious wanting to kill other people. Yeah, how'd you stop them? Well, I'd kill them. Well, and then I could wait if we was going to play such a game, and you would never see anything ironic about what you just said. No, I didn't mean that literally. But yeah, if you see what's right in all these situations of irony, run-of-the-mill stupidity in life, such as religions killing each other in the name of goodness, and you're saying that is the height of stupidity, and if I ran things, at least I'm smart enough that if I ran things, things wouldn't be like that. All right, what would you do with those that couldn't see the light? You're left with a situation that you don't see as ironic. That is, you are still dealing in a world, a binary world, wherein things are only partially seen, and therefore they're never seen for what they are. They're seen as something else. What people call religion is not religion. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I guarantee you it is not religion. If there is such a thing as religion, what you call religion is not religion. Now, it's not just that one area. What you call a dump truck, it's not a dump truck. Don't let that stop you from going to work if you're in that kind of construction business. Or if you're a cleric, I guess, until you can get a decent job like a truck driver, going back tomorrow, go back to the temple or the church and at least get your pink slip and your last payday. The feeling of irony, the feeling of futility, the feeling of outrage at the ordinary level of intelligence, that things are not as they appear to be, or that things that claim that they have certain purposes do not live up to it. The promises and the dreams of man, the expectations are never met. Boy, does it take a genius. Yes, but I'm alive now in 1988, and I'm me. Don't guess you ever read anything from the Egyptians or some of the Oriental writings even before that, or even the Greeks, or even any of the stuff in the 1600s, or you just never walked into a bar and listened to somebody else. I mean, this is an astounding discovery you've made, that things do not work the way they are purported to work. Of course, the real discovery you hadn't made is how mad you are. Now, I'm not mad, I'm intelligent, I'm insightful. I could be a satirist if I was literate. I could deal with irony if I knew what it meant, or I could spell it. Do you see that this is not just a world of letters? Because it does not have to be written for me to keep referring to satirist. You do not have to be a Jonathan Swift. It does not have to be in the world of the Voltaires and the letters. It is the attitude of people, ordinary people, even before that there was widespread literacy on this planet. It is the feeling of people of looking around at other people in the so-called institutions, at the times when it was just people dealing almost in a feudal state with one or two people above them that seemed to control everything. The clerics, the great landowners. They would look to them, and the landowners, the clerics, everybody that seemed to be their betters, those few groups, they would state that the purpose that they served was such and such, or they would say the purpose of life is such and such. And the ordinary people, the 94%, would look around. They didn't have to be literate. They never heard the word satirist, but the feeling is, this feeling of frustration, this feeling of irritation is, well, wait a minute, the people that supposedly, and they just accepted to start with, that there seems to be somebody in life knows what they're doing. These people dressed up real fancy and live in these places that have doors. They don't have to live out here in the slop, and they don't have to eat crumbs. So it's just wired in that they know something. And they state the purpose of life is such and such, your purpose is such and such, our purpose is such and such. And they listen to it, and then they look around, they live life, another 30 minutes, an hour, 2 weeks, and they realize this is not true. What is being said is not what is being lived. Energy continues to be churned up. Things are partially seen. Things partially seen are not seen as what they are. Well, that's really a better way of putting it, believe it or not. They are seen as being something else. Stay with that one. It may sound like the same thing to you if you minored in logic, or even if you passed 101, but it's not. Things only partially seen are always seen as something else. Not slightly different, not askew, not colored, not distorted a bit. They are seen as something else. Now, I'm being as serious as words will allow when I started out and said it was an absolute rule. It is. And assume it is for a second, for the sake of us having a verbal discussion, for the sake of argument. If that is literally true, then it's not been a matter that you just don't have, up until now, the correct, full perception of such and such, of love, of religion, of culture, of history, of yourself. Oh, let's strike that, of course. Did that sound ironic to you? I hope not. Wait till we get down to ironic. Try and consider, if this is literally true, what the implications are. All right, that's enough considering implications. Now, consider what that means. That everything is seen as being something else. as I seem wont to do of late, oft times, I must ask you, if that be true, if that were true, and you can jump into that great, right just above now, beyond now, area of implications, would that not answer a lot? Now, using the best intelligence you can muster right now, you might say, yeah, but notice I'm not dirty enough to say, all right, what? Because you couldn't say what. If I said, didn't I answer a lot? And you went, yeah, and I said, what? You wouldn't know. Because ordinary intelligence can't tell you what it answers, but it could say this, which it would be doing, that if that is literally true, it does answer a lot. That is, on the basis, that means that everything that I have seen that's been called something, that's not what it is. That X is actually 17. That X could be polka dots. That would answer a lot. But intelligence under routine conditions could not stop right there and say, well, I'll tell you exactly what it means, what it does imply. Well, let's backtrack on my little pseudo-irony. Let's really consider what would that mean about the way people see themselves. Everybody, that all the way from, apparently, at one time, let's say, that everybody had the ability to see themselves as a whole. They can see themselves as a totality. That even if it was just as a child, when you had less intellectual capacity than you do now, but at one time, let us say that you had a feeling, an intelligence about yourself that resembled, that was close to being in toto. That, yeah. Now I must also suggest to you that that passes very quickly. Like, you know, it's 24 hours or 48 hours fast enough for you. It goes very quickly. It has a certain impact, I suggest to you, on many people, that you feel like something extraordinary happened at an early age in your life, but you don't know what the hell it was. I would suggest to you that that was it. And you didn't know it at the time because it seemed natural, but it goes very quickly. And then you no longer see yourself in toto. You no longer see yourself as my figure here of the blue X, remember. That's what that represented, the totality of whatever it is I'm talking about, or you're used as an example. Just very shortly. After that, you no longer see yourself in toto. Now I can say that there's no proof for this, but there is, if you can hear. The proof is this, that you now seem to have the ability to split your attention. You seem to now have the ability to think of two things at once. You seem to have this ability. If none of you like those two, everybody has this ability, that I'm not exactly as I should be. That is, I have undesirable side effects. They're undesirable present, undesirable side effects to me. Because that's all. From another view, that is all the feeling of guilt, of dissatisfaction of being alive is that the person seems to be, now let us say, this red area. And the whole idea that I could be better, I could be thinner, I could be stronger, I could be more handsome, I could be more intelligent, I could have developed my talent, I could. We're talking about all this area out there. That now ordinary intelligence, as binary intelligence must do, has now split you up into effects and side effects. And everybody takes the side of them that seems to be the one in charge of deciding what I should do, changes that should be made, areas of myself that should be cleaned up. That seems to be the effect. The parts that should be cleaned up, the parts that should be changed are what? They're undesirable side effects. I didn't seem like too bad a guy when I first took me, but now I'm growing hairs coming out of on my forehead. This medicine, this drug is not exactly what I was after. It has undesirable side effects. Not only is that the truth, not only is that correct, but now I refer you back to the original. Not only is that correct that you're only partially seeing yourself, and everybody sees a side of you that you don't like, and it doesn't matter what you could feel like. The almost reality could be that you are a cellular Jew, that you are a molecular Christian, that you are a biological Muslim. And so to be any of those three things, of course to be human, but to be any of those three things in specifically, you have got to have what? You've got to have side effects. There's got to be aspects of you that are not Islamic, Christian, and Jewish, right? Right. And that's all the area out here. It's a side that I am trying to clean up. It is a side of me that, well, I don't know, it's kind of like undesirable side effects. If you could see yourself in toto, and if I am giving you a fair description of things not normally seen, that you are simply that blue circle, that's you. Drug X will lower your blood pressure, but it also will make hair grow out of the bottom of your feet. Hair growing out of the bottom of your feet is not a side effect. I know I've said this before, but I want you to see this. I'm not playing with words. It's not a side effect. You've got to have some intention. You have got to have wired up into you, under certain conditions, you've got to have wired up into you a prejudice. That is, I don't want hair growing out of my feet. All right, let me be more reasonable. I don't need any more hair growing out of my head. I'm not bald. But my blood pressure, it needs to be treated. All right? You have got in your intelligence a frontier, a contour, that this drug that they describe has this kind of contour to it. You know, let me do it like this instead of just a circle floating there. It has that kind of contour, and over here is the area that grows hair. My attention, my sight is focused here because I suffer from high blood pressure. I'm not fucking bald. So, the ability of this drug to produce hair is unwanted by me, right? Now back to you. That doesn't sound familiar. Why did you end up here? Why did you end up anywhere? Well, there are parts of me that I don't want. It's faulty vision. It's necessary in the city. It's flawed intelligence. I don't know why I keep shifting around. It's just that this is too objective. It's stupidity. All right, I'll be more scientific. It's dumbness. That's really more scientific. It is. It's dumbness. There are no side effects to drugs. Drug X is what it is. And I'm just using two things. I'm sure it has something else. But Drug X, this is not theoretical. There are drugs floating around, whatever they are. Drug X, reduce blood pressure. It tends to grow hair, to increase hair growth, encourage hair growth. And I'm just going to make them up. I'm probably correct. In many people, it can cause diarrhea. And in some people, it can cause extreme weariness. And you could say, right quick, to take my example, you could say, well, now come on, some of these really are side effects because nobody wants a drug that will cause diarrhea. Nobody wants a drug that will cause weariness. All right, forget all about what people think they want. I want you to see that of course I really don't want to count it for it, that is the totality of this drug. That's the totality of a person. That's the totality of Christianity. That's the totality of an institution. That's the totality of an epoch of history. That's the totality of an institution, the military, the world of academia. It's everything. But consciousness has got to see, ordinary intelligence, for it to operate at city level, has got to see in what appears to be episodes. Has got to see in frontiers. There has got to be a contour between this and that. And I couldn't decide what I want. This drug seems to be a banquet, at least of four things here. Let's see. Which one do I want? The truth is, you're going to get them all. But that is not the way intelligence operates. You can say, a doctor can say, well, look, you're going to have to take the risk. The side effects come with the drug. But still, if you can hear this, this is way beyond subtle. This is so quick. Its ordinary intelligence really dismisses the side effects. Even if the doctor says it could happen, and if later it does happen, and the doctor said, did it happen? You say, yeah. It still almost dismisses them as this close to non-existent, is what side effects mean. That is, I have no interest. That's not what I want. That's not what I need. And so the doctor can say, now I warn you, you're probably going to suffer some diarrhea from this, or you're going to suffer headaches. Yeah, okay, give it to me. But it will lower your blood pressure and you won't go around dizzy and fainting. Well, they give it to me. But remember, headaches. Okay. But literally, I'm not using an example of some guy that's just real dumb, because remember, you don't have to be real dumb. That's not required. It's just necessary you be dumb. It is almost that close of a denial. Now back to you, instead of drugs and things. That doesn't sound? How about all these attempts? All the way from the philosophical atomist of Athens up to Freud, that they're parts of the human psyche, they're parts of the human soul, parts of the human spirit, parts of the human mind that people will deny exist. Side effects. Nobody wants to admit. I shouldn't say nobody wants to. I keep cleaning this up, and I refuse, or I begin to cut down, which I've already done for those of you who hadn't noticed, on regular terminology, like talking like we're just ordinary people, sort of, and we're talking about extraordinary things, but like we're talking fairly ordinarily in ordinary language. I am stopping some of that in case you hadn't noticed. Stuff like sort of and it's almost like. There is no such thing as sort of and almost like. Sort of and almost like is that. But I have done it in the past rather than just stand here and make a continuing string of apparently dogmatic statements. But there's no such thing as dogmatic statements. There's only apparently. We got to turn the tape. We don't got to turn the tape, remember. See if I can pull in several things from night before last taping. Remember the example I used that I said that I had read a scientist pointing out that all of the so-called laws of physics, established, recognized, accepted laws of physics, came from men's minds, and if there's going to be perhaps further radical laws discovered, theorized, that were closer to the actual fabric of reality, that they perhaps would come from some area outside of man's mind. But if they were there, it was possible that man's mind could never correctly see them, because he surmised that perforce, them being outside man's mind, they might be so irrational that man could not see them, and so on. Could there be any area outside of man's mind from which, quote, ideas could come? And I shouldn't make ideas sound like too great, because ideas are, remember, they fall, although they may sound to be specifics, they still fall, or particulars, they still fall within the genus of their things. That was one of the rules I didn't start with tonight. You understand that everything is a thing. So is there any area from which an idea could come besides man's mind? Is the possibility that there are places where ideas, things, could come from outside of man's mind? Is that perhaps what man has always been seeking? Is that what all this is about? Perhaps. No? How about this great scientist that I quoted, and all of you who thought you listened along night before last, and even now, and that you could feel a solid basis for the initial premise of the scientist's statement about all the known laws of physics, which laws of physics, remember I was just using a hard example to start with. Laws of physics, under that is included everything from dumb religious beliefs to your opinion of yourself and the Mets' chance again next year. Everything falls under the laws of physics. Because remember, even the laws of physics are particulars within the genus of what? Things. So, the whole concept, the apparently righteously based concept that, wait a minute, the laws of physics, that is, our perception of reality, comes from our mind. Therefore, reality, as they've been playing with, certain areas of life's body, been playing with for years, is there our perception of reality, and then somehow is there a reality out there that we may or may not ever perceive. May I refer you? Is the camera looking? Let the camera think about that. The question that is our perception of reality is simply that, our perception, individually and or collectively, and that there is, outside of man's mind, some kind of objective reality that we may or may not ever be able to perceive with our mind. I can answer that. Go dig up John Locke, Hume, Descartes. Dig them all up, and I'll answer it. There it is. That's the answer. That's the answer to that question. You understand? The answer to that question is, boy, is that a goofy question. Boy, do you not know what you're talking about? Now, I know that's pretty pushy for me to threaten to say that right to John Locke's face, but I think I'm up to it. Because, of course, dear John wouldn't hear it. Couldn't abide it. But there it is. You understand, there needs to be a stronger version of specious, but I don't guess there is. Yeah. It all seems so almost just right. And it's so far off from being anywhere close to right. It's so far off that it can't be compared. It's so far off that accidentally, ordinary intelligence cannot just be walking along the great paths of philosophical thought and in some way stumble on it. Nobody has ever stumbled upon it. No great thinker, no great thinker has ever sat around and thought about such things, which is kind of the basis, even if you didn't really catch it or if you didn't like it, the basis of all this inquiry back in the city can almost be summed up into a general classification of that question: is our perception of reality simply our mental perception, and that there is a reality out there all around us somewhere that is different from our perception and could be just completely different, and we don't know it? That is sort of the basis of all religion, all philosophy, all kind of intellectual inquiries, whether you ever use those words or not. But do you understand the inquiry, the basis of the question about could we have a perception, this being one thing, and then having reality being something else, that both of them are partially seen. One of them is not partially seen and the other one's seen. One is not partially seen, that is, all right, I've got this thing. I've got this firm theory. It's almost a certainty that all of us have some matrix, some schematic, some paradigm, some model, some concept of the world, and it's in our head. That's got to be true. And some people out in the city, ordinary thinkers, have even gone so far, religious and philosophers, so far as to say, if that was true, that would almost explain some of why there's such disagreements of opinion, or why we have Jews and why we have Christians and why we have Muslims and why we have Zoroastrians. Why there are conflicts of opinion, why we have vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream. That almost explains it, would it not? But even though I have this strong theory, this strong sensation that all of us have a kind of picture of how the world is, also. Now see, they take that as a given, whereas it is still subject to that. But they go from there that, all right, that's a given to the good, strong thinkers. But then, the curious part that makes a philosopher, that keeps him off the street. Now, the trouble is then to think, well, if that's true, then is there not the possibility that there's some kind of other, I don't know what they call it, some kind of other like objective reality outside these models we have? But they take one as being a sure thing, and the other one a long shot. But that is the basis of duality in the consciousness. That one, you seem to be thinking about one thing certain, and there seems to be this kind of background noise, kind of uncertain, a vague memory of what you thought you were about to think about, or what you thought your opinion was. There's always this going on. There always seems to be that which is you thinking or talking. Then there seems to be the partner. You're Smith, and you're on the phone talking, and it's always like Jones is back there fooling around with the safe, or fooling around with accounts receivable, or talking in the background, or making fun of you, or complaining. And then you look around at him, and suddenly you're Jones. And you're back there, and you, then Smith, is up there in front of the phone, and you think, is he talking about me? Is he trying to change our bank accounts again? Is he up there making fun of me with his back to me talking on the phone? He doesn't fool me. That doesn't sound like the same thing. One of them seems to be a certainty. Whatever it is that seems to be where you're standing in your own nervous system right now, that seems to be you. The good old Freudian ego. Yes, I'm me. But there's strange noises in the back. Yeah, but you got a partner, the name of the company, Smith & Jones. Yeah, I know that, but I don't like those noises back there. I never have trusted him. Well, who am I speaking to? I'm Smith. Same story later. Who am I speaking to? Oh, this is Jones. And neither one of them realize you're talking about the same thing. Neither one of them realize that Smith and Jones is that original totality. Smith sees Jones as being a side effect, and vice versa. To believe that we are holding a model, perhaps let's talk it to an individual level. An individual, distorted, prejudicial, self-serving model of the universe and other people, just everything. That we're holding this, and yet people exist outside of our perception. Life exists in some way. That really makes the word specious, it just explodes it. There's just no description. Because one of them's not a sure thing, there is no premise to start with. We're dealing with what appears to be reason in the city, but remember I pointed out to you, reason in the city is like the period on the end of a sentence. It is a cessation. It is the end of one line of intelligence. It ran out. Therefore, you came to a conclusion. The very thing that seems to be an anathema to what reason and logic is in the city, that is, your intelligence ran out, and so therefore now I know what I'm talking about. That's exactly it. Well, I say that's exactly it. Even what I just said is subject to that because it's not exactly it. If there was an area, as a scientist was speculating upon, upon which he was speculating, and there was this area wherein some kind of new information, new laws, new data could come that was not man's mind, would these new ideas, these new laws, could they not very likely be the kinds of laws that would bind up, would merge, would forge all of the heretofore partialities? And the answer is yes. And the answer is this: if that happened in you, if you were privy to such laws, if they were just out there somewhere and they in some way came into your being, and you did not explode, and they came into your being, you would turn a corner. You would be in another part of town. You'd be in another section of the universe. You would then not be limited to 3D intelligence. All of that would seem partial before would now seem more complete. But to you it would seem complete at the time. And, if you remember this, everything that you've ever known in a sense, you realize I hate to rub it in, but I told some of you this a long time ago, that everything you quote know is wrong. Not a little bit. It's not distorted. It doesn't need to be straightened out a little bit. It's simply fucking wrong. That's it. Again, for those of you who like theoretical arguments, I got to ask, if that's true, wouldn't that explain a lot? I guess that's about the final use for that sentence, that if everything you know is wrong, would that not explain a lot? I guess, even for me, is a classic understatement, the classical understatement. Another thing that came up, the question I used from somebody in the group not before last year, remember someone was asking, in general, my reference to a primal flow, like some kind of initial cause, but a kind of undifferentiated energy that everyone is wired up to assume, to believe, to feel, to think is there somewhere. But the question, using my own terms of primal flow, how does it get, apparently, how does it become smaller? How does it get inducted or deducted, I should say, into these smaller certain human energies? And I dealt with that in several ways I tried to suggest to you night before last, but in light of what I was talking about tonight, can you see that another partial response that I could make to that kind of question would be to point out, well, first let me put it again as a question before I try to point your nose more directly at it. Could you see the possibility that there would be no splintering, no splattering, no cutting up of the primal flow until you believe there is, till you think there is? You don't want a second to think about it? It is another way of stating this. This is another way of stating that life seems to be cut up into all these pieces. That is another way of viewing this time-honored, religiously and otherwise, feeling that there is a triumvirate, that there is a triad, that there is a three-headed monster, or gods, or spirits running the universe. This magical, this feeling that there's some magical mystery, strength to the number, to the idea of three. Differentiated energies, me calling it three forces. Could you see the possibility that only, remember what the question was that the person asked me, how does the primal flow, assuming there is such a thing, and I meant something when I said it, I was trying to get you looking a certain way, but how does the primal flow get cut up into these three other flows? And for me to say, can you see the possibility, just for a second, that this only happens when you think it happens? It's another way of expressing this, that you only see things partially when you think you see them, when you name them. Not you individually. When the nervous system has reached the point, for purposes that life has of its own, that humans now have begun to operate from a higher end of the nervous system than any other creature, any other thing of which you can presently be aware, that to do that, it must take, let's call primal flow X for a second, just X. It must take this original, this whole X, and for it to splinter up, become episodic, it can only do so when you think it has. I guess it's been perhaps a couple of months ago. Kyrut did one that I sat here in the room, and it almost produced no response other than slight shudders I felt from other cities on tape. The Kyrut pointed out that in the city sense, only those people have a soul who believe they do. How about what it seems I've inferred about this idea of gods throughout the history and up until today, and the futility, to say the very least, the flawed concept of what it was. How about this? What if gods do exist, but they only exist Got to finish it? Well, let's go a little further off on the side. This is the end of the week. And I got to stop early tonight, so I'll try and be sure that I don't hurt anyone. We'll consider this psychic surgery. What if there's not even a primal flow until you think there is, until you hear there is? Let me make the sense more specific. What if there is no primal flow until you hear/think there is? The sentence I said just before this one, does anybody remember it? That the variation that only those have a soul who believe they do. Of course, you know that Kairoot speaks in tropes, not metaphors, but in tropes about souls. And then me saying, what if gods exist, but for only those who believe they do? And of course, I couldn't leave it there. And by gods, you assume I don't really mean what you think I mean, but I mean what you think that other people think it means and what you used to think it means. But now, how about this? What if gods do exist, but they could only exist if you didn't think about them? Because if you thought about them, you've cut them up. The primal flow, remember? That's where I was trying to push you off on a side path. So what if there is no primal flow until you hear/think there is? What if there is no certainty? What if there is no stability? What if there is no unity unless you think there is? But see, again, the coup to you know what of life is you can't perceive that there is until you have been able to think of it. And to think of it, you thought of it partially. What if this doesn't exist? Until you think it does. And part of my job was to convince you it did exist. And it doesn't exist. But then you can say, well, it's got to exist, whatever this is. Whatever it is, you say it doesn't exist, but it does. You're standing here saying it doesn't exist, and that's part of what this is. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because of... What if you're only partially seeing this? And I keep telling you it doesn't have a name, then sometimes I say, all right, we'll call it this, but that ain't the name, and you think, well, it's this. But what if that you always see it as something else? Back to that which is of supreme importance to most people, to yourself. And all of my many hints and exhortations about not talking about yourself, not introducing yourself, not naming yourself, not looking at yourself, not because trying to stir up some sham form of humility, but there's all a process of seeing only partially. As long as you'll answer to any name, not from somebody else, because you got to do that. When they say, all right, you're in the dump truck, pull it over, we're going to shoot. I'm talking about to you, for you to answer to anything. Like, what in the hell are you doing this for? That is, you talking to you. That is, apparently, you talking to you. We're too late tonight for me to go on to that, but all of you should be on to that by now yourself. I just keep saying it. You talking to you. You talking to you. Well, anyway, so there you are, and you're talking to you. You should not respond to it. That's what I've been hinting and talking about. You should not respond to it, because when you do, you have responded. You have accepted. You have helped reinforce a naturally existing partial view of something. For you to say, well, to yourself. For you to, I'll get it out. For you to say to yourself, well, you shouldn't do that. you should treat that with the same kind of respect that an aircraft carrier would a flea. Are you going to do that again? But you promised you were going to do so and so. Don't you think it's about time that you any response to yourself is a response to partiality. It is a response to side effects. It's like you saying, I don't need hair. I especially don't need hair on the bottom of my feet. And while you're saying that, you're taking these pills as fast as you can. You're swallowing them. Could you hear me? I said, I don't need hair. I've got these pills. I'm about to choke on these pills. Do you have any more? It's the same thing. Nothing unusual. It won't hurt you. You can try it at home, no matter what Kyrute said. In the city, it's not going to hurt you. But I refer you again. Things only partially seen are always seen as being something else. You are not exempt from being a thing. Your opinions are not exempt from being things. Your opinions toward you. This act of you, of you talking to you, excuse me. This dynamic of you talking to you still classifies as a thing. The part that I have not said tonight, the part that I can't say, and I'm going ahead and give it a shot, knowing how badly it will miss, but I know how badly it all will miss before I say anything, don't I? If I don't, geez, you people have been taken for a ride. But then you're supposed to go, yeah, but where do we go? Well, I can't answer everything, all right? The part I have not specified in words is this, is that if you were not subject to only partially seeing, then you would not be describing, you would not be accepting any description of anything to yourself, whether it came from apparently out there or whether it came from apparently in here, that is, you talking to yourself. And so therefore, the unspecified part tonight verbally is this, then wait a minute. Then if we're talking about a new level of intelligence and being able to see in more complex ways, to be able to see in other dimensions, to be conscious of time as a continuing backdrop and all these many descriptions I'm giving, what you're saying is, if I hear it, that is the part you haven't said, the overall bigger part that you haven't said tonight, but I could induce all of this from these particulars into a more central, the lesser pieces into a greater whole. And what you're saying, almost, if I'm hearing you correct, and I say I'm doing your part, is that the very kinds of things that you might then see might be the kinds of things that you could